Hey everybody, this is Mark Harvey and welcome back to Beyond Profit, a Global Perspective. And I'm here to talk about tariffs. After the last video, a lot of people were asking a lot of questions about tariffs. Of course, it's a hot topic. There's politicians talking about it all the time. There's always this talk about we've got to punish that country or do something about our trade deficit or change our trade policy. And tariff seems to be sort of like the let's just do that to that other country in order to get what we want sort of thing. And I want to go into it a little bit. What are they? What do they do? Are they as effective as people think they are? Let's demystify some things and let's get into it. As usual, if you find value in these videos, I would like to invite you to like and subscribe to this channel. In a previous video, we talked about protectionism. That is, the effort of governments to try to essentially control key industries, resources, or reassure labor and engage in policies in order to make all of that stuff happen. Tariffs is one tool they use to do it, and a tariff is basically an import tax. And I ran across a video of me giving a talk few years ago anyway about it, and honestly, things don't change that much, so let's cue the video.
And the effect of tariffs are the following. First, it artificially raised the price of foreign goods, of course, compared to what we have here, which creates that incentive to try to buy those. So it decreases the incentive for the public to buy the goods that come into the country. It has a tendency to slow the economy by raising prices, through a mechanism that I will explain here in a few minutes. And it also may increase government revenues through higher taxes. That is, if people actually are buying more of these products, then obviously you're increasing the taxes. That may mean more revenue. Now, it may not, because if the tax is a disincentive for people to buy, then that means that there may be lower taxes in the end. But nonetheless, that may be a potential effect. Let's just say, for example, that we have a Ford versus a VW in the United States. Let's assume that they're comparably priced, comparably valued vehicles, in this case $10,000 each, in this example. And let's say that the United States decide that they want to put a $1,000 tariff on the VW coming into the United States, making its value $11,000. How does that alter the incentive structure for you to want to buy a U.S. car?
Make you buy more likely.
Okay, it makes you more likely to want to buy that car. Now, if you are a manager of Ford, what might you be inclined to do under this scenario?
Offer a rebate or lower the prices.
You could offer a rebate, or you could lower prices. What's another strategy that you might do?
I could just make an extra $1,000.
Oh, I could make the extra $1,000. Crap. I mean, I don't know if I'd make it $11,000, but what I could do is I could do some market research or whatever, look around and see how much more can I charge for that Ford and still be able to make it seem cheaper than that VW. Okay? So what you see here is the prices are going up within that particular sector. So tariffs have a tendency to create a bit of pressure for inflation on occasion. So it also has a tendency sometimes to put a dampening effect on the likelihood that people are going to buy cars in general. So who's selling more cars in the end, all things being equal in this case? Ford. Okay, so still benefits Ford in the end.
Tariffs have a significant impact on inflation. If you think about it, when fewer products come into the United States, that means there's less of that stuff to go around, which means the price of those products are going to naturally come up. Now, when American producers start noticing that there's less competition, then they can feel free to increase the prices of those products over time. But this doesn't happen overnight, right? When they start making those decisions, these products are already inside the United States, right? The tariffs don't start taking impact until people start wanting more of it and the stuff comes in. In the meantime, there's loads of stuff in warehouses, so it's not going to have an immediate impact on that inflation. But at some point, that's going to change as people start wanting more things, and the domestic suppliers then start jacking up the prices, as we saw in our example. I'd love to talk a whole lot more about the causes of inflation and how this all played out anyway, but we can do more of that in a future video. Right now, we're focusing on protectionism and specifically tariffs.
Who benefits when you end up with tariffs like that? Who tends to benefit?
For some businesses.
Okay, some businesses do. The protected businesses
Right.
might
Governments,
benefit.
taxes.
Governments through taxes might benefit. Consumers?
Probably
so
not.
much. Okay, great. If countries feel like they have a tariff that is going to harm them in some way, what do?
Get even.
Let's say the United States puts tariffs on Germany, and then Germany turns around and says, hey, we're not going to take that, so we're going to put tariffs on the same products, sometimes different products, right? You can end up with this thing that's called a trade war. But there's something else they can do. Well, they can go to the World Trade Organization. Now, in, I believe it was 2002, the United States put steel tariffs on world imports. The other Europeans and the Japanese and stuff took them to the World Trade Organization. WTO says, yes, it's a tariff, United States, you should stop. Right? Went on and on and on about this year after year. And this is interesting because it's George Bush who did it, right? George Bush is ostensibly a free trade guy, somebody who believes in this stuff. He ends up putting tariffs on steel. His argument, I think, had to do with the quality of the steel coming into the United States, which is still sort of an anti-free market thing. Most free market people would sort of say, hey, you know, you can shop around and choose the best steel yourself, you know, let the market sort of decide. But why did he do that? Keep in mind that there's lots of reasons why you might want to help out the steel industry. Why else do we care about steel, by the way? Arms, right. Okay, so, you know, it's something that's necessary for your, you know, you don't necessarily want your steel industry to go away because it's helpful for you to use for building your defense, right? So it's important from that standpoint.
Help out steel producers here.
Okay, so he wants to help out steel producers here. Why does he want to help out steel producers?
We had investments in steel.
They contribute to his
I don't know
campaign.
personally. It's a good point. I doubt that President Bush probably had personal investments in steel, at least not directly. Well,
Try to win
okay.
Pennsylvania in the election.
Oh,
That's a fun fact.
okay.
Yeah.
So let's think about this for a second, at least from this standpoint, from a power standpoint, okay? So you're President Bush and you won the 2000 election, right? I mean, you didn't get as many votes as the other guy, but you won kind of the Electoral College by the Supreme Court, whatever, right? But he got in just barely. And he's thinking, okay, so there's Pennsylvania and there's Ohio, and the steel industry is in trouble. You know, where are most of the steel jobs? Ohio and Pennsylvania. After so many appeals, they said, United States, you're guilty of this tariff. And what did the United States do?
Okay, I guess you're right.
And they took the tariffs away. Of course, at that point, barely won Ohio, but still, he did fine. You know, made it just barely won the presidency as a result. What do you think about that?
It's politics.
Smart, yeah, I was gonna say it's just smart politics.
Okay.
As the talk that I just shared with you illustrates, countries tend to retaliate when tariffs are put in place. There was a historical situation where there were very low tariffs, and then when Donald Trump became president at some point, he increased them across the board to Mexico, Canada, the EU, and of course most famously China. The United States puts tariffs on Mexico, which it did at one point. Mexico then would take revenge, if you will, right? They're going to act out against the United States by refusing to buy certain products. In this case, one of the products they refused to purchase was Wisconsin cheese. So in the process of trying to punish Mexico, that is, charge our import companies to make it more expensive for Mexico to do business, we basically cut off a market for one of our domestic suppliers and kept them from being able to sell their products someplace else. As you can imagine, when we've got a flood, say, of cheese, Wisconsin cheese in the United States market, causes the price of those things to go down, which also harms those cheesemakers. That means that they're making less money, and what are they going to do with all this extra stuff that they have? Well, eventually the supply chain adjusts itself, right? Which means that Mexico, over time, if these tariffs go on for a long time, are going to completely stop purchasing stuff from Wisconsin. They're going to find other markets. And so what we found, particularly in the tariffs that were enacted during the Trump era against Mexico, that permanent connections between Mexico and European suppliers of cheese basically replaced the connections that traditionally would have happened between the United States and Mexico. And so as a result of tariffs, we ended up punishing the people who we actually were probably trying to help. Here's another thing. A lot of small businesses complain about tariffs because when you put tariffs against different countries, it becomes more expensive for them to operate, and it potentially puts them out of business. Let's say that you're a manufacturer and you're relying on certain machine parts to come from certain parts of the world, and then the tariffs are put on that particular country, which means those machine parts now are super expensive, right? So now you, as a small business owner, have to pay a whole lot more for those machine parts to bring them into the United States to supply your own American-built product. And then it becomes so expensive that your consumers may stop or slow down purchases of it, which then endangers your business. So it's important remembering that even though sometimes tariffs and some of these other tools, they seem very attractive, there's often an economic and business-related cost that goes with that. As I mentioned before, it's importers that pay the cost for tariffs, but ultimately when those products get passed on to distributors and so on, from the importer all the way down to the end of the supply chain, somebody's going to have to pay that difference if people want it badly enough, and these costs ultimately get passed on to the consumer. That's particularly true for industries such as retail, grocery stores, those that have small profit margins. If we want to look at the effects of some of these tariffs, there are some studies that have come up with some numbers. A 2019 study found that consumers bore more than 100% of the costs of washing machine tariffs. Appliance retailers charged more than the tariffs cost them. So U.S. consumers generally bear the brunt of any kind of tariffs that happen. If you look at a January 2021 study commissioned by the U.S.-China Business Council, and by the way, I'm reading from a website, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, those trade policies cost the United States 245,000 jobs. As Reuters news report put it, the USCBC claimed that a gradual scaling back of tariffs could help stop the bleeding, while also arguing that a failure to do so would lead to even greater job losses and more sluggish growth. In addition, trade deficits were actually higher with China after the tariffs than before. According to the London-based think tank, the Center for Economic Policy Research, the tariffs imposed by Trump during 2018 cost the U.S. economy $6.9 billion in a year, above and beyond the $12.3 billion paid by American consumers and importers to the federal government, and that totaled $1.4 billion each month. If I were to wind up this whole discussion on tariffs, I would say that sometimes these things are not quite what they seem. In fact, the idea that you can get something good out of trying to put trade barriers up against other countries usually is counterintuitive and unsuccessful. That's not to say that there isn't necessarily a good reason for doing it at times, right? Maybe there's a good national security reason for doing so. Maybe there is an industry that is worth protecting and tariffs is a good way to do it. Or maybe to satisfy voters or to satisfy workers, we're going to do these things even though it's not the best economic policy for us at all. And that's an important thing to remember when we start talking about protectionism, is that when we're talking about those sorts of plans, we're not thinking about what's best economically or best for business. We're thinking about what seems right politically. And sometimes the economics and the politics don't line up well at all. For Beyond Politics, a global perspective, I'm Mark Harvey. See you next time.